I'm Mark Kelly in Mr. Saltwater Tank, coming to you on behalf of SaltwaterAquarium.com. For the past 2.5 months, I've been running this 220-gallon holding tank here in my house. Today I'm going to share you my experiences with running the tank, as well as a lesson that I was reminded of that's especially fitting for you new reefers out there. But first, why a 220-gallon holding tank? Well, let me give you the backstory first. It's a temporary system that's going to bridge the gap from my old tank to my new tank. So why did I get rid of the old tank? Well, in case you missed the past 3 months or so on my social media page, my wife and I are adding onto the house. I get a bigger office, which means bigger tank, going up to a 987-gallon tank. Now the tank isn't here yet. A little thing called COVID-19 is getting in the way and delaying the tank. Then I've got a gap of time between when my old tank was torn down and now a larger gap of time before the new tank is going to arrive. So this 220-gallon tank is keeping my fish and keeping a lot of my corals. So how is this tank set up and how do I run it? Lighting on this tank is provided by 3 Ecotech Marine XR30 radions, 2 Generation 4 Pro radions, and 1 Generation 5 radions. Now ideally, if this was my long-term display tank, I would put more radions over it, but this is just temporary. For now, I have 3 lights at my disposal. It's getting the job done. All these radions are running the Coral Lab AB Plus program at 80% intensity. The lights are on about 12 hours a day. Flow is provided by a Red Sea Reef Wave. The Reef Wave is my gyro pump of choice as it has the most intuitive and easy to use interface. I do have a protein skimmer on this tank, and I went the budget route and got myself a Reef Octopus Classic skimmer. It works okay and I'm getting what I paid for. The tank does have a small refugium and it's not doing much because I don't really have a nutrient issue in this tank. Nearly all the rock in the tank was new Real Reef dry rock, which I did not cure in any way before I put it in the tank. Automation on this tank is handled through my Neptune Systems Apex. It's monitoring the temperature in this tank as well as the other holding tanks in this room and controlling the heaters in those tanks. I do have a Neptune Systems Trident hooked up on this system just because, hey, I had it, let's run it. It's interesting to watch the data coming out of it on a much different setup than my old setup. My first takeaway with running this tank is that now that I've gone from a fully automated setup to a semi-automated setup, I sure miss my fully automated setup. For example, on my old 450-gallon tank, I was running automatic water changes through the Neptune Systems dose. Once a week, all I had to do was refill my saltwater mixing vat, make sure it was at the right salinity, and then check the salinity in my display tank to make sure that everything was going well. Other than that, that was it. With this tank, once a week, I got to take an hour and a half out of my day, do a 75-gallon water change on the system. That involves running hoses through the house. I pump water out, through a hose into the kitchen sink, and then I pump water from the mixing station in the garage, through a hose to the house, into this tank. Now, let's keep this in perspective. This is a first world reefer problem. There are plenty of people that would love to have a saltwater tank, even if that meant having to do a manual water change once a week. But once you've gone from fully automated to not automated and you have to do it manually, you remember where you came from. It's like driving a Ferrari for years and then you go get yourself an Audi. You're like, the Audi's okay, but it's not the Ferrari. I really miss the Ferrari. Same experience with this tank. It's good, but it's like, it's not my old system. One interesting thing that I was reminded of in having to do these manual water changes is that one of the main purposes of doing a water change is to replenish the elements in your tank. And I've seen this through my Neptune Systems Trident, as whenever I do a water change, I get a large bump in alkalinity. Over the course of the week, the alkalinity slowly falls, and then I do another water change and it jumps back up again. Now this tank is temporary. I'm not dosing anything in it because water changes get the job done. This is something I've talked about in our dosing webinars. It was that when you first start your tank, and as you start to grow corals in your tank, you don't need to add dosing mechanisms if you don't want to. Water changes are going to carry the day for quite a long time, and then when the water changes can't replenish those elements, then you go to the dosing. Despite my first world reefer grievances with this tank, it's actually doing quite well. All the coral in here is thriving. I've got soft corals that have doubled in size. My LPS are doing well. In fact, they're the standouts in the tank. My Lobos have never looked better. I've got a Scully in here that got stung in my old frag tank. Now it's nearly fully recovered. My SPS are encrusting on the rocks and my sea bay anemone is happy as well. All that was a pleasant reminder to me of an important lesson, especially a lesson that I tell newbie reefers, which is there's lots of ways to run a successful saltwater tank. If you want to run a saltwater tank with no automation, your tank can be successful. If you want to fully automate it, your tank can be successful. Do you want to do water changes? Do you not want to do water changes? Do you want to automate your water changes? In which case, I did in my 450-gallon tank. That tank was successful. This tank is getting once a week large manual water changes, and this tank is successful. So as you're looking at different saltwater tanks out there, you're seeing different people's approach, I encourage you to keep an open mind. What works for them may not work for you, but how they do things isn't the only way to do things. You can keep this hobby as simple as you want, or take it over the moon and make it as complicated as you want. Fish room or not, automation or not, it's all up to you. So don't get caught up in you have to have it this way to make it work. In fact, if someone told you this is the only way to do a saltwater tank, otherwise it won't be successful, I would turn and run. There's lots of ways to skin the cat. Pick a method that works for you and then stay the course. If you're trying something new, try it for 3 months before you give up on it. Don't go, this looks cool, I'm going to try that, and the next week go, oh, that looks cool, I'm going to try that. Shiny object syndrome is real, especially in the saltwater tank hobby. Pick the path that works for you. If you're trying the path out, give it time and know that your route is likely going to be different than someone else's route. With that, it's time to do a water change on this tank. I'm signing off for now. I'm Mark Callahan, Mr. Saltwater Tank, coming to you on behalf of SaltwaterAquarium.com. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next episode.